Welcome back to the Be Life podcast. I'm Joe Palmisano. This is Josh Potts. And Zach Richards is behind the camera producing this whole thing and directing it. And I don't know what this is, I think 39 episodes, something like that.
It's
40.
It's 40. It says
It's
on the board.
Big 4-0. I can't read that.
Our producer put up a whiteboard just to keep us on track with that number.
Yeah, and I can't read it though. But so anyway, it's 40. We've hit 40 podcasts. And we're continuing today with Revelation. I'll tell you what, we may be on Revelation until there is revelation, until it actually happens. And one of these days, I'm just gone and I won't be here. Well, either way. But anyway, we're going to be talking Revelation again, and I'm going to turn it over to Josh because he's got kind of the agenda for today, what he wants to talk about, what he wants to do. I think you want to introduce some characters again, right?
Yeah. 2 weeks ago, we had taken a lot of time to break down the one side of the battlefield that is the army of the Lamb or the Bloodied King. And we saw some of those characters introduced in the throne room scene in chapter 4. And then some of the other characters introduced a little bit later on, such as the witnesses and the multitudes, and just the large number of offspring or followers are mentioned again and again. But we hit up most of the characters that follow on the side of the Lamb. And so this week I wanted to jump to the other side of the aisle and talk about the antagonists.
Ooh.
Yeah. So just as the side of righteousness has one chief figure, the Lamb, the Bloodied King, so does the side of bad, the side of evil. I feel like bad is never like a powerful enough word.
I know.
It's like the opposite of good, but it doesn't feel like enough.
No, bad is like you told a little lie or something. That's bad.
Well, if it sounds evil, the side of evil.
Yes.
The chief figure that we have on the side of evil is first introduced to us is really properly introduced to us in chapter 12, which is the story of a woman and a dragon and the dragon's pursuit of that woman.
Mm.
So we have the slain lamb as the chief figure on the side of good, and we have the fiery red dragon, the 7-headed dragon, as the chief figure on the side of evil. Joe, as you read through Revelation over the last couple of weeks, what sort of thoughts came to your mind as you were going through that story between the woman and the dragon, the woman who was giving birth and the dragon who was her nemesis, trying to pursue her and then trying to destroy her and her offspring?
Yeah, I actually didn't spend a lot of time on that and didn't know exactly what it was doing.
Yeah.
And what that was all about. I figured we'd cover it. But, I tried to focus reading through it once and then focusing on a few things. I'm waiting for you to explain that. I really don't know who the woman is.
Yeah.
I know who the dragon is. I mean, dragon, I believe, is Satan. Just like you got Jesus, you have Satan, you have the two antagonists in this whole show.
Yeah.
This whole story. But explain that.
Yeah, Revelation does explicitly call the dragon Satan and the devil. It brings those titles all together. But yeah, the story in chapter 12 is of a dragon relentlessly pursuing a woman who is giving birth.
Now, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
When I did think of that real quick. I know I'm interrupting you.
You're good.
But it brought something to. I took that as being Israel,
mm-hmm.
and pursuing, and Satan pursuing the bride, the woman, and that it was the nation of Israel.
Yeah.
Is that true?
That is one interpretation.
Okay.
It's actually not one of the most common ones.
All right.
From the last week, we talked about a couple of different interpretive camps, different lenses that we look through as we're reading the text. One of them is the historicist perspective, that looks at the story of Revelation as talking about not just the empire of Rome, but the empires who had come before it and those that had come after it. The historicist interpretation became very popular during the Reformation. And so a lot of the characters and events are interpreted in light of the early and high Middle Ages and the events that were happening there. And so from the historicist perspective, they look at the woman giving birth to the son as being the church.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the church post Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Some other people,
and that would make sense.
Yeah. You have themes that come up through different scholars that are examining this, but the fact that it's a woman immediately has us making connections to some other characters throughout Scripture, like Eve. Did you pick up on that at all? Did you think about the woman of Eve?
No.
Okay. Well, just this last Sunday, Pastor Dan was talking about
the enmity between Eve and Satan.
Yeah. In Genesis chapter 3, God curses the serpent and says that there will be enmity between the serpent's offspring and the woman's offspring. And here we have a woman and a serpent that are going back and forth. And so some people like to connect that with Eve or the nation of Israel or the church. And you can see this is actually really a great example of these different interpretations, different interpretive lenses, and how they can look at the same text and find different truths. It's really what leads me to my interpretation of idealism, where I can see each of those truths as being valid and being true. And so I think that the wisdom found here can apply in those situations of old and the situations yet to come.
Why would there be multiple interpretations allowed? I mean, when you look at Scripture, Christ even says, Jesus says, and don't change one dot of this. And then even in Revelation, I think towards the end it says, don't change anything in what's written in this book. It kind of lends itself to say that there is one interpretation of this book, and so how do we go about coming to a conclusion if there are multiple interpretations?
Yeah. Honestly, I think that's one of the most beautiful things about Scripture. I think that's one of the things that made it relevant for the reformers hundreds and hundreds of years ago and makes it relevant for you and I now. I think that the wisdom that is found beneath the prophecy and the wisdom that is found beneath the narrative is applicable in a lot of different situations. And I think that is the divine inspiration of the Scripture coming forth. If a book only had one interpretation, it wouldn't really, it would be very relevant to that specific audience to which it was written, but then it would lose its relevance pretty quickly after.
If it has multiple interpretations, is it in fact truth?
Sure. I would say absolutely.
Okay.
I would say that it's probably truer on an even deeper level.
Okay.
If it's true beyond one specific time and place, if it's true even beyond that, I think it's even truer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I'm just, I mean, people would naturally ask that question. If you have something that has multiple interpretations, what is true?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think if you have a fundamentalist worldview that is looking for the one literal interpretation, and you find out that there's a second valid interpretation or a third or a fourth, then yeah, that can really like rock your world. That can really shake things up.
It could.
And so I think it's healthy from the start to not have that fundamentalist interpretation, to not look for one literal interpretation, because we see multiple.
Let me ask you this. When you look at other verses,
mm-hmm.
When you look at Jesus saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me, are there multiple interpretations?
I mean, through church history, there have been different interpretations of what that means. Some people put a ton of weight into the Eucharist because it is the literal blood and body of Christ, and that you cannot experience God in fullness except through Jesus, in a literal sense, through the Eucharist.
Wow. Yeah, and I get that. I get that. That comes through in the Catholic faith.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's not really an interpretation that we hold.
No.
But we put a lot of emphasis on a personal relationship with Jesus through prayer and devotion and scripture reading.
So there are verses, there are books in the Bible that you can lock on and say, these are true. I can accept those as true. I can accept the fact that when Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, no one comes to the Father except through me. I can accept that as truth. And then there are some books, and I would even say, Book of Psalm, maybe Psalm, the Ecclesiastes, some of the books that you look at and they have you could have different interpretations, different ways of reading them. Even Proverbs. If you read a proverb, it doesn't necessarily mean, some of them don't mean exactly what they seem to be saying.
Yeah.
Or you could take them multiple ways.
Yeah.
So there are books. So forgive me for this, but where do you divide? I guess when Christ speaks, you got to believe that that's true, except when he's speaking in parables. But he's telling a story there, and usually he explained them. But a book like Genesis that, has different things, different interpretive parts to it, and Revelation, you could look at multiple truths in there.
Yeah.
Is that...
Well, so I would go back to the most necessary step is the deconstruction of a fundamentalist worldview, to say that when there is one interpretation, that is true. And when there's multiple interpretations, that's true, right? Both are true. If there are multiple interpretations, if there are multiple applications, if it means a whole lot to the first century because of their cultural baggage, and it means a whole lot to us because of entirely different cultural baggage, that's still true, and that's true in a good and productive way.
And and even in those where there are multiple interpretations, there still has to be a limit. This is getting real deep, but there has to be a limited amount of interpretations that can be true.
I think there's absolutely bad interpretations.
Yes.
I think there are dangerous interpretations.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Interesting. Well, let's go ahead. I had to get that in my head, and I'm hoping that this was important for other people too, that are looking at this and saying, okay, what is true? What is absolutely true? What is not true? What has multiple interpretations that can be true?
Yeah.
And so there is a limit to the amount of interpretations that can be true, even in multiple interpretations.
Yeah. Less mathematical and more liberal arts.
Got it. Got it. I understand.
Yeah.
I hope you do. Go ahead.
All right. So through chapter 12 in Revelation, we have the story of a woman who's giving birth. And behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on its head 7 diadems. His tail swept down 1/3 of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. And she gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne, and the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. 1,260 days is 3.5 years, and we actually see that a couple different times here through the book of Revelation. And that is a callback to the book of Daniel that talks about the empires that have yet to come that will rule for 3.5 years. And so in the book of Revelation, he's saying that same sort of theme. And again, this is where I think that it's sort of dangerous to have an absolutionist, view on this, to look at prophecy and say Old Testament was predicting and New Testament is fulfilling, is overly simplistic.
Well, but that's true in some terms.
Sure.
In Christ.
Yes. I think that is one interpretation. Yes, I think that Jesus and the story of Jesus resonates with a lot of the prophetic traditions. And sometimes it's explicitly told to us by the biblical authors and editors that this was done in order to fulfill this. So sometimes we are given that. Other times you just see it as a callback to that Jesus is following in the same tradition as the prophets. If you were to Google a list of Old Testament prophecies found in the Gospels, you would find so many. You would find like countless of them. And some of them are very explicit. And like I said, the text even calls it out. Others of them are very subtle and implicit. And it's just meant to sort of resonate in that tradition.
Mm-hmm.
It's the authors and the editors saying, hey, remember this sort of theme that we saw here in these prophets? Yeah, look, it's also here in the life of Jesus, meant to just sort of connect to the two, but not necessarily this was a specific prediction and here's a specific fulfillment.
Okay. Yeah. But let's can we focus on the dragon?
Yes.
And I've heard the 10 horns or the 10 nations, or what was it? Rome is involved in that and the whole thing. And one of the horns was broken, and you could get into all these things.
Yeah.
About who the dragon is and what the 10 horns are and all that stuff, pointing to Rome. The Antichrist is coming out of Rome because here's a little head that ends up getting swept up by the other 10, and it's crazy when you think about all this stuff. So why was John given all of these little details?
Yeah.
What are the 10 horns? What are these things? What do they mean?
So,
and what are we supposed to take from it? Or is it important that we take something from it?
Yeah. I think there can be bad interpretations. So I think that people can take those details, get so hung up on them, and try and find things in their current day that they can apply them to. I actually just recently heard about some people that are always on the lookout for the end times that think that this weekend the world's coming to an end. Yeah, it's Pope Francis is opening symbolic gates, and that is one of those gates is the gate of Lucifer. And because it's so many days after his birthday, and they get hung up on these.
Whose birthday?
The Pope's birthday. Oh. Yeah, he turned, I think, 88.
Okay.
That's what he turned. And so they're concerned that 8 days after his 88th birthday that certain prophecies are going to come true. Right. So people can get so hung up in the numbers that they miss the forest for the trees.
And they start focusing on those things instead of keeping their eyes on Jesus Christ, which is what.
Absolutely.
We could simplify this whole thing.
Absolutely.
And so you've always had these people.
Yeah.
They're everywhere.
Yeah.
They try and predict certain things and go back and try and understand it. And again, my question, I guess, is how important are these to get caught up in? Should we get caught up in how many horns are on this dragon? How many 7, what does he have? 7
diadems, which is a term for crowns. I heard one author distinguish. There's 2 different Greek words used, sometimes translated crown, sometimes translated diadem. One of them has the implications of a laurel that a Roman general was given when they conquered something, and another has the implication of a crown for a sitting king ruling over a kingdom.
Which he is at that point.
And so
the world, right?
Yes. Yeah. The word diadem here is, the seated power.
Right. Okay.
So, yeah. The details here are meant to be a callback to Daniel. So the number of horns and the number of crowns is supposed to remind us of Daniel.
But, however, I have to John didn't write this thinking that I'm going to take you back to Daniel when I write this. He was writing what he was seeing at the time.
We can only see and understand based on what we have seen and have already understood.
Right. I get that. But he was called up and he saw these things and he was told, write down what you see. I have to look at this and think that John wasn't manipulative in it. In other words, he wasn't saying, well, if I write this, it better coincide with what I know of Daniel. He was writing what he saw and maybe interpreting it by what he knew, but not actually trying to make it coincide. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, if you were to view the invisible workings of the cosmos and you are to put that into words, it would be very limited and not do it justice.
Yes.
And that's the case for any person. We have our limited perspective. We have our limited vocabulary, our limited imagination.
Yes.
John's imagination is limited, but inspired by the Old Testament that he would have read and heard read every day of his life. So I think that perhaps John saw things that he didn't know how else to describe, but he has this language that he remembers from his past, and so he uses that language.
I get that.
So yeah, I don't think it's a manipulation. Actually, a lot of scholars will look at the original manuscripts for Revelation and comment on how sloppy it is. And that's actually part of the reason why some scholars think that the Gospel of John and that Revelation are not written by the same author, because the Gospel of John is very well thought out, and that I've heard it described as like a literary masterpiece in its original context. But then Revelation is described as being sort of sloppy and haphazardous and sort of all over the place, which when we first started this conversation, you had talked about, could you imagine like beholding all this and just trying to write it down?
Oh, yeah, it'd be sloppy.
Yeah, it would be sloppy.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that sometimes we have a little bit of slop in here, that if we're looking for these, very artfully woven callbacks to the Old Testament, to both the law and the prophets, and, hit these themes throughout Scripture in a very artful way, we find that in other books of the Bible that we might not find here.
Yeah, and I still find it beautiful. And
yeah.
I don't look at it, I guess I don't look at it from a literary standpoint, from a, I'm going to dissect this and I'm going to see if it's sloppy, as you say, or if it's unified and it has flowing. And I don't look at it as that. I look at it as someone writing all this down.
Yeah.
And just trying to grasp it as he writes.
Yeah. I think the weight of it is supposed to grab us more than anything else.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So this dragon is described as both a serpent and a dragon, and having multiple heads. This is most directly a callback to a figure in the ancient world known as the Leviathan, or as Tiamat. This is actually a figure that before the nation of Israel existed, when it was just Abram that God was calling out, there were still nations and tribes and world religions that existed around Abram. And so sometimes it's hard for us to think about there being religions older than the Bible, because we're like, well, the Bible goes all the way back to the creation. So, it goes all the way to the start. There's nothing older than that. Well, before it was formally arranged, there were religions that existed. And so one of the... throughout the ancient Near East, in the context where the Bible's
before creation,
before Judaism.
Oh, okay, all right, I got it. Yes.
So before Judaism,
I just wanted you to make that clear.
Yeah. But it's weird, because our Bible goes all the way back to creation. So we're like, there's nothing older than this faith. Well, before this faith was formally organized in Judaism, you had older religions. So one of the older religions talks about a creation of the world existing when God slew the great serpent dragon. It puts together two words. Serpent and dragon are literally just like paired up butt to butt, that God slew this beast, cut it in half, and put half of it in the sky and half of it on the earth. The book of Genesis says that God divided the waters from the waters. And this more ancient tradition, this beast that was slain was Tiamat, the dragon of chaos and of water, of the seas, and that the seas were split in two, and half were put in the sky and half were put in the seas. And it's funny because it's cool because Genesis has some of that same language. You can tell the authors and the editors, as they were putting it together, were sort of influenced by their way of interpreting the facts, and their imagination was inspired by these other religions that existed around them. So Tiamat, Leviathan, is this dragon that is older than Judaism itself. It's this image of evil and of chaos that will ultimately be destroyed by God.
Interesting.
So we have it described here later as being Satan, being the devil. The Satan is a title that means the accuser. We see the Satan character throughout the Old Testament numerous times. It's a title given to different characters throughout the Old Testament. It's a title at one point given to God. God is called the Satan. It means the accuser. My wife loves watching Judge Judy, and so I think it's fun because that sort of shapes her language a little bit as to how she will talk about news or pop culture or things like that. A lot of the Old Testament is shaped by law code and using legal language for a lot of things. That's why we are guilty of our sins. And that's why Jesus paid the debt. He paid the fee for our sins. It's a lot of that legal code. Well, the Satan is the prosecutor. And so at one point, God is called the Satan. At other points, like in the book of Job, one of the members of the heavenly council is described as being the Satan, the accuser. And then the other term attributed to this dragon, it's the dragon, it's the Satan. It's also called the devil. And the word devil means the slanderer or the liar. Which
fits.
Yeah. When Jesus is tempted in the wilderness, he is met by the devil, who tells him lies and perverts the truth and says, well, if you bow down to me, then I will give you this, and sort of perverts the truth. And he combats that with the scriptures in their truer and better interpretation. So the author of Revelation here is bringing these three images together: the Satan, the devil, and Leviathan, and saying this is the great enemy, the chief beast. Now, for people reading this, they know that God has already slain this beast to create the world, that in the beginning, God defeated this. So they have confidence that this creature is going to lose. And as we continue through the story, we see that the dragon does indeed lose. The lamb obliterates him and punishes him for eternity.
Now, who's the other guy with the dragon? There's somebody who is like his PR guy, his main guy.
We have the first and the second beast in chapter 13. So chapter 12 talks to us about the great dragon, and then chapter 13 talks about the two beasts. And it sort of mirrors the lamb and the two witnesses. And here we have the dragon and the two beasts, the chaotic things. The word beast is a term used throughout scripture to describe wild and unruly things. Sin is described as a beast crouching, waiting to pounce. And so just like the dragon is Tiamat, the chaos dragon, these are beasts of chaos and destruction. And so some people interpret the first and the second beast as being two individual people. Some interpret them as broader ideas, just like I was saying about the witnesses. Some interpretations are these are two literal people. Others say that it is two broader ideas.
Yeah, and if I were to take my theory of witnesses as two real people, then I would probably take beasts as being two real beings.
Yeah.
And not a broader idea. Although, well, again, with the witnesses, there's so much detail about them being killed and leaving them in the street for for 3 days, and people are just gloating over them and watching them, and I can imagine. I mean, I try and imagine television
Yeah.
as we have it now, 24-hour news, that these two antagonists, these two witnesses who have been empowered to do miracles, are almost like the apostles now. They've been empowered to do miracles, and they go around and they're just antagonizing these people who hate them. And finally, they're killed, and they're laying, and they just leave them in the street because they want everybody to see them, and the 24-hour news is focusing in on them. Well, the two witnesses are still there, and people are gloating, and the news people are gloating about it, and then all of a sudden they come to life, and God says, come up, calls them up to heaven, and they leave. And I look at that, and it's, to me, Josh, there's so much detail that it's beyond an idea. You have to really work. I think, in my mind, I would have to work a lot harder to make that an idea that laid in the street for 3 days and people gloated over it. And then all of a sudden Jesus called them up and rose them and said, come.
Yeah.
So I look at the beasts. I would look at it as saying, it's a little bit different. I don't know how the beasts come to an end. Like I said, I read through it and I focused on certain things, and I need to really study this book, and I'm going to. But until I see how the beasts die or leave, or what their life is like while they're on Earth, it's hard for me to see what they are.
Yeah.
Whether an idea or a real people. But like I said, if I was going to be that strict or be that way with the witnesses, then I would probably be that way as a beast. I would probably go into it, in other words, looking at them as being minions
Yeah.
of Satan.
Yeah.
Almost like I could just imagine slick talking PR guys, dressed in real nice suits and kind of promoting this dragon, this Satan,
Yeah.
and his lies. It's like isn't there a prophet that also comes in there? Another person that's kind of like the evangelist for Satan.
Yeah. So
We'll get into that, but I look at these people as being real.
yeah.
That's a long story, long-winded explanation for that.
No, that's fair. I think that the narrative presented in here feels so real, and that, yeah, it seems like the Occam's razor would lead you to believe that it's a literal person, right? That you're describing the events of a person's life. Why would I should probably assume it's a person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I get that. And I think that the story that's presented is captivating, and that the narrative is detailed in a way that's sort of, like you said, it stirred your imagination and you feel like you could picture it in our day and age, this happening. Yeah. I think that that's good storytelling. I think that is captivating. I think that that's powerful.
Yeah. And again, I said this last week, and I've said it before. I look forward to the day when I'm face to face with Jesus, and I know these things, and I could finally look and go, oh, so that's what it was.
Yeah.
Oh, but until that day, the only thing that I could do in my life is read these, interpret them, hopefully allow me to get closer to who God is, and to maybe have an urgency in my relationship to Jesus Christ, but not detract from what, my wife says it so well, is, and I've heard other people say it, but she said it to me from the very beginning, is majoring in minors.
Yeah.
And focusing on Christ. But I find this fascinating, and so continue, please. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Anytime that you cut in to share something, I'm reminded of, oh yeah, I've had or currently have those same sort of thoughts.
Mhm.
So when you share like that, I definitely think it's speaking to there's at least a handful of people watching who are thinking the same thing.
One or two.
I know that a lot of times I've thought or am currently thinking the same things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So in chapter 13, we have the two beasts. A lot of people will categorize these as a beast of military power and of economic domination. And so when we're talking about the first beast, Revelation 13, 1 through 10, we have a couple verses that stand out that help us understand that military language. Verse number 4 says, people worshiped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast. And they also worshiped the beast and asked, who is like the beast? Who can wage war against it? So this first beast is a mighty creature who can wage war against it. It's strong. It has the backing of the dragon, of the serpent. No one can defeat this mighty beast. You go on to verse number 7. It was given power to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them. And it was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. We look at the Roman Empire that had expanded out, that literally had conquered the known world.
Mm-hmm.
Had reached across the globe and taken control of every nation, every tribe, every people, every language. And so we see this imagery of just military domination. There was a trend for several months where women would ask their husbands how often they think about the Roman Empire. And many women were shocked to find out that their husbands often think about the Roman Empire, because the Roman Empire is kind of cool.
That's true.
Yeah, they were like mighty conquerors. They were inventors. They were warriors. They conquered the known world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's cool. We make a lot of movies about it.
And their uniforms were sharp.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We make movies about it. Video games and comic books and stories. They were mighty warriors.
Yeah.
And if I were to tell you that, like, we were going to the movies and you said, what are we watching? I said, well, it's about the Roman Empire. Your assumption would probably be that there were going to be war scenes in it.
Oh, yeah.
That's what they were known for. Unlike anything the world had seen before it. When Daniel's describing the beasts in his vision, he describes a beast that comes that is unlike any other. And he describes this empire that will come, that will conquer the world in a way that no other has. And again, it feels like a very similar callback to that he's saying, this is that beast. This is Rome. Rome is this conquering beast that no one can stand against. It has taken over every tribe, every people.
Can it be a new Rome?
Sure. Absolutely. I think the fact that he never calls the empire Rome in Revelation is important. John chooses to call the empire most often Babylon, but also calls the empire Tyre and Egypt. And it describes some other empires that existed around the same area of the world in nearby centuries of time, closer, more proximal history for them than it was for us.
So is this beast the Antichrist?
Well, the word Antichrist is never used in Revelation.
I know. But I'm asking you that because where did that term, I mean, obviously there's people put together that term because in Revelation there's a Jesus, there's a Christ, a conquering Christ. Again, he is a bloody lamb to start. He is a conquering hero at the end, or whatever, as it develops, and he comes in the clouds, and then there is an antichrist, somebody who's fighting against him in this final battle. So that's where the term comes from. Now, is the beast the Antichrist? Is he? But we don't think of the Antichrist as being a general, a great warrior. We think of the Antichrist as being almost a politician. When I hear people talk of the Antichrist,
yeah. So some of the language here in Revelation describes, an antithetical gospel that there's a message being spread among the people to follow the way of the dragon, and that is problematic, that is counter to the true gospel, the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Right.
And so, yeah, that feels like it's an anti-gospel for the anti-Christ. And when we think about messages of propaganda being spread to further some dark agenda, we think about corrupt politicians. I think in our worldview, that's the image that comes to mind.
Sure. It is mine.
Yeah.
And it's one who brings, again, my interpretation, my thoughts on one who brings peace for 3.5 years, or brings peace, and everybody loves them because we have peace.
Yeah.
We have peace in the world. We have prosperity in the world for the first time.
Yeah.
And so everybody begins to embrace this person. And then this person declares himself to be God, and the abomination, that the whole thing that goes on in the temple and everything else.
Yeah.
Which I don't know, because there isn't a temple right now. So I don't know how that, if that's built or whatever. So that's always, I don't want to get in those weeds, but I look at that and I see this person that all of a sudden, once he has the power, which is typical of our world, it's very easy for me to grasp.
Yeah.
Because it's an Adolf Hitler kind of guy. It's a Mussolini kind of guy who makes the trains run on time and everybody loves him. And then all of a sudden he becomes a totalitarian leader who wants everything from them. Mm. And so I look at, that's how I see the Antichrist,
yeah,
the beast, so to speak. But this is talking about a general,
well,
so to speak.
You had mentioned the term like bringing peace. There is a term historians use, Pax Romana, yes, which means the peace of Rome. There was travel open between different territories under Roman occupation that wasn't available before that. There was a unifying language of Latin that was spreading throughout that empire that there wasn't a unifying language before that.
That's true.
So it brings a sense of peace and order through military conquest.
Yes.
Through bloodshed and violence and death, we get this peace, right? Yes. It seems oxymoronic. Through bloodshed, we get the peace.
That's true. That's true. And we're able to hold the peace for a while.
Yeah.
Because of that.
Yeah.
Because of the threat of more of that.
Yeah.
Until the corruption from the inside rotted the government so that they could be overthrown.
Yeah.
But I get that. I understand. So, and let me make this clear that I think part of what you believe in Revelations, we talked about this, is that this may have already happened.
Mm-hmm.
That would fall into that theory for you, being that this was possibly the Roman Empire that they're talking about, that it already happened.
Yeah.
My interpretation, or what I want to believe.
Yeah.
And that's a great point.
Dude, that is such an intellectually honest statement. There's so much when I read the Bible that I say I believe, or this is the doctrine. Honestly, it's I want to believe.
That's right. And that's and it hit me when I was saying that. What I want to believe is that this is going to happen. And so I hold on to that. And I look at the things where in Revelation, for instance, in 1 where he said, chapter 1, verse 3, where he says, because it was now, the present, and the future, the things that are still to take place. Mm-hmm. So then to me, it says it is dividing, where John's up there and he's called up and he sees what's going on now. And we talked about this, where Christ is the priest of the churches. But then we see what's going to take place is the conquering hero, the conquering Christ, the all-powerful Christ on the horse, and the white horse coming down and taking his throne.
Yeah.
But again, it's what I want to believe. I don't know.
That's absolutely. Amen. I don't know for
Yeah.
certain. I wasn't the one given this vision. And to be honest, based on what I'm reading from John, I don't know how clearly John actually knew what he was seeing versus just being overwhelmed with images
Absolutely. I
and
think when Daniel wrote his prophetical writings in the book of Daniel, and when other people, when Nehemiah, when Zechariah and other people wrote of prophecy, I have a feeling they had no idea. They couldn't picture Jesus Christ when they talked about Jesus Christ. When Isaiah talked in chapter 53 of Isaiah, talked about Jesus Christ and talked about this, just almost perfectly describing what was going to go on with the cross and everything. He had no idea.
yeah.
He couldn't picture that in his head. So I think John was probably the same way. It was like, I have no idea what's going on. I'm passing this on because you told me to.
Yeah.
But I really have no idea what's going on. So we're here in our finite minds wanting something that fits and is easily understood, when most of this is never going to be understood completely until we're changed.
Yeah. 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 I think that clarity, that the pursuit for clarity and specificity is both a good thing and something that we will never arrive at. I think that to be motivated by understanding the scriptures better is a good thing.
Oh, yeah.
I think meditating on scriptures is a great thing. I think that assuming you're going to get to a point where you have the answers is a very haughty thing. And I think that the more you meditate on scriptures, the more you'll realize how far off you are truly holding those answers.
Yeah. The closer we get to Christ, the closer we get to God, the more we realize how empty we are.
Absolutely.
And how far we are from the point. It's amazing because before we're saved, we think we have all the answers. We're wise beyond anybody else. The moment we're saved, we realize at that moment when we know we need salvation, we're very weak. And then as we get closer to God, we get more weak. It doesn't make us stronger. I mean, I look at it again, and I'm saying this because of this book, but Paul in Romans in chapter 7 was in agony. And this is Paul. And he had already traveled a lot when he wrote the book of Romans, when he wrote the epistle to the Roman church. He had already done many great things. And yet he was sitting there saying, "Oh, what a wretched man I am."
Yeah, right.
As he got closer to Christ. And so, when we look at this, Revelation does one thing for me. It makes me realize how stupid I am. How weak I am. How little I know, and how much I try to act like I know. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I want to interpret this.
Yeah.
I want to. I have a hunger to interpret this book. And so, like I said, I want to interpret it. Part of it is because I need to know. I think I need to know. God says, I don't think you need to know everything. The other part is ego.
Yeah.
I want to know this. I want to be able to come into a discussion and go, I know what this is about. I know what the 10 horns are. How dare you talk to me about it? I know what they are. And so the more you go through this with me, the more you're showing me how far I have to go. And it's wonderful. I don't mind that, because in my weakness, he is strong. And that's really where I want to be.
Yeah.
But it's amazing to me. So this is actually accomplishing a lot. I hope it is for other people. I
I hope
truly
so.
do.
Yeah.
I truly do. I hope that with other people, it's accomplishing the same thing, because with me, it's just making me realize that I don't have to have all the answers.
Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, I can't have all the answers.
Yeah. I think the mystery is something that we can easily lose because we get so we have vocabulary that helps us sort of categorize the mystery, and then we sort of redefine that vocabulary for ourselves in a way that takes away the magic of it. And I think that that's problematic. Well, like, one of the biggest examples I have of this is describing God's space as heaven. When we talk about heaven, any church going Christian will give you a definition. Oh, that's the place where God lives. It's God's hangout. It's a really simple definition. I think it does the exact opposite of what it's supposed to do. The heavens is the sky and outer space and the infinity that is what is up above us and actually below us and all around us. And space it goes on forever by all of our calculations. And that's mind blowing. And that is what is described as God's space, the heavens. Like, God's space is so vast and wonderful and abstract and beyond our comprehension that the only word the authors could think of was, it's like the heavens. It's like looking up into the sky and trying to categorize and measure that. It's impossible, right? But we've taken that word heaven, which is meant to describe this amazing thing, and we've come up with a simple definition for it and just put it in our pocket so that we can comprehend it.
Who to us is in heaven? Who is the Jesus? So I'm looking at this and going, heaven is, because I've never defined heaven. It's never been, but you're doing it, and I'm thinking, where is heaven? Heaven is where Jesus is.
Yeah.
No matter where that is.
Yeah. Heaven is God's space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God's space. I love that. I like that. I've never tried to define heaven, and nor do I think heaven is one particular region or area of the universe. Well, this is heaven. You got to go right. There's pearly gates.
Yeah. But like, having the word heaven limits our it does for a lot of us, limits our imagination. We read John the Baptizer says that the kingdom of heaven is near. And we're like, oh, okay. That just means like Jesus is coming because Jesus came down from heaven. And we're like simplifying it. It's like, no. The kingdom of the infinite skies, the kingdom of the invisible world that is moving all around us that we can't comprehend is here. Like, there's so much weight to it that we just sort of simplify.
Have you ever read Frank Peretti's books? Have I talked about these on the show?
I don't know if you have on the show or just in our personal conversations.
What is it? Evidence of Demand? No, not Evidence. That's Josh McDowell. This Present Darkness and Piercing the Darkness. 2 books by Frank Peretti, I believe. And those to me, I read those early on in my Christian walk. And I don't know why, but I read them. And maybe that's part of how I interpret Revelation, because it showed the symmetry between the spiritual realm and the physical realm that was going on simultaneously.
Yeah.
And so there's this whole story physically, what's going on in the world. Simultaneously, there's spiritual battles going on that are taking place behind the scenes, creating what's happening in reality.
Yeah.
It's two brilliantly written books that bring it into reality. And it's almost like what Revelation is doing.
Yes. That is apocalyptic literature.
Yes.
To look behind the curtain and see the invisible forces moving in tandem with the physical world that we see around us.
Yes.
That is apocalypse.
These books, like you said, they take there's it reminds me of this. It reminds me of what's going on in Revelation, where we're seeing John seeing things, and there's a reality that's going to take place, but he's seeing behind the curtain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you said that's apocalyptic literature.
Yeah, we see that in other places in the Bible. A couple of popular ones where we see the same sort of invisible forces working the physical is the Exodus story. The Exodus story talks about God facing off against the gods of Egypt. But we see Pharaoh as being the one in power and the villain of that story. So is it the gods of Egypt or is it Pharaoh? It's both. It's the spiritual forces animating the physical world, working in tandem. The only verse in the Bible that talks about Lucifer is a prophecy condemning the king of Tyre. It's saying you are like Lucifer. You are Lucifer. And it uses this ambiguous language like, is it a simile or is it actually talking to Lucifer, the son of the morning? So it's saying you who are this celestial being in heaven. Lucifer is a term for Venus, the star Venus. You, this celestial being in heaven, are also the king of Tyre. And so you are animating these things and you have done terrible things in your kingdom. And so it's describing the spiritual and the physical working in parallel.
So so if you look at that, John is looking at this and he's trying to he's trying to record what is happening and still place it in reality. Because let's face it, the Revelation starts out very real. It's letters to 7 churches.
Yeah.
And so then all of a sudden it's like, hey, come up here. And he's transported into this whole, it's almost like the Wizard of Oz, to be honest with you.
Yes, that's fair.
But it's God.
Mhm.
And so we know that it's inspired. We know that it's not the Wizard of Oz, but it's almost like that. It's like it starts out real. It finishes real, but all in between is this visual, spiritual,
cosmic soap opera.
Yes. which is unbelievable if you think about it. What had to be going through his head as he went through this.
Yeah. And this is some of what I was talking about last week when we were looking at that 10,000 foot view of Revelation. Yeah, it starts out with letters to churches and then takes a lot of time looking at the spiritual world that is impacting what's going on in those 7 churches.
Mm-hmm.
But those 7 churches are faithful followers of Jesus living in exile, living in a fallen world, in the world, but not of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's describing that eternal struggle of belonging to Jesus but still being in the world.
Yeah. And all the different levels of it, because some of them aren't following too well.
Yep.
Some of them have succumbed to the world. They're in different stages of life, each of them. And it really is used also to point out to our churches and to us all the different levels of where a church can end up.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's all about, here's what's going on in real life, and here's why.
Yes. Yep. Exactly. That's it. Exactly. Here's what's going on in real life, and here's why.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which is this present darkness and piercing the darkness. Both of them were exactly.
I definitely got to read this.
Both of them were exactly the same as far as they would take a chapter. You'd see a chapter. It takes place in this college town, the first one, and there's all this stuff going on and all the arguments and people fighting and people and all the things that are going on. And then the next chapter, it's all spiritual. And it tells all the things that are going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And it just gives back and forth and you get lost. It's almost, it's like got lost in these books because it became so real.
Yeah.
Oh, here's what's going on behind the scenes. Here's what the demons are doing. Here's what the angels are doing to protect us, to fight against us, to hurt us. And it anyway, I'm going to get it for you. I got to get you this book because you will absolutely
Yeah,
love
man,
it.
that sounds good. I love that.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No,
So, but I think as we look at Revelation, it's starting to become clear to me what Revelation is, what Revelation isn't, and the importance of my knowledge of everything in it.
This is what I said a few weeks ago, that I think the fundamental message and story of Revelation is pretty straightforward, and then you can spend forever meditating on the details and getting lost in the imagination of them. And I think that's what makes it a perfect finale to the Bible. I think that Genesis is a perfect overture, and I think that Revelation is a perfect finale, that it touches on themes you see throughout the Bible, that it's relatively simple, but it has just layers of meaning to it and a lot of callbacks to the rest of the texts that have preceded it.
And we have a perfect God who orchestrated it and put it together just how it's supposed to be.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love the Bible.
Yeah, so do I. Trust me, so do I.
All right, so the first beast, sometimes described as an antichrist, is portrayed here as having great might, great influence, power that no one can stand against. That the beast is, people worship it because the dragon is a sponsor of it, and people worship the dragon and people worship the beast. The second beast is a little bit different. So the first one comes out of the chaos of the seas. The second one comes out from a deep pit in the earth. And it is described as economic dominion. The most famous verses from Revelation 13:11 through the end are talking about the mark of the beast, the number of the beast. And what is told to us about that is that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name.
See, that to me sounds like a very real possibility.
Absolutely.
Especially now, since we've become we do banking online, everything's online. You get a number, you get a debit card, the whole thing.
I had this sort of like existential crisis once when I was about 15 years old, and I panicked because I got my own bank account, and I had started doing some like online cashing of checks, and my grandmother was very worried, and she said, well, online banking is, it's not safe. That's not real money. I said, but I'm cashing a check. Is a check even real money? I said, what about cash? Is cash even real money? Cash just represents our gold value. Well, it did until we deviated from the gold standard.
Normal 16-year-olds don't have thoughts like this now, Jeff.
And then I thought to myself, why does is gold real money? What does gold represent?
Yeah.
Like, we have just arbitrarily decided that gold symbolizes value, that I assign some amount of value to it, and it represents this go-between of my goods and services and your goods and services. There's no such thing as money isn't real. And so I sort of like had this existential crisis.
That's a good one, because it's really true.
Yeah.
It's really true. It's all arbitrary.
And if you start to break it down, it can drive you to chaos. But if you choose to participate in the system, then it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Money has always been that. Money has always been an arbitrary thing that if you choose to participate in, then you're a part of it, but you also become a slave to it.
Well, I mean, Bitcoin. Think about that, where all of a sudden somebody just said these things that you don't even hold have value.
Yeah.
And people made millions.
And if enough people agree that it has value,
yes,
then it does.
And then they all decided it doesn't have value anymore.
Yeah.
It's crazy, but it's really true.
Yeah.
That was a very profound thought in your mind for a 16. I don't think I ever thought that. It was like, I've got this $1 and that was it.
Yeah.
So when I look at 666,
mm-hmm.
if that's the mark, I'm assuming it's the mark. But if that's the mark that's going to allow you to buy and sell and trade and do everything you need to do, I could see that as very much a reality, but I could see it only in the future.
Yes. Okay. So this is the mentality that my grandma had when she was talking to me about online banking. To her, you can't trust zeros and ones, but you can trust shiny rocks, gold, right?
Good point.
To her, you can trust this, but you can't really trust this. Ultimately, it is all arbitrary and it can all collapse at any minute.
Very true.
Ultimately, we're supposed to rely on God, not on money. Jesus said you can serve God or you can serve money.
Yes.
These are and that is the ultimate struggle that I feel like we have, especially in our late stage capitalist American society that we live in. It's the struggle between, are we trusting God or are we trusting money? Because money is starting to fail us in a way that it hasn't for decades.
Yes. And the dollar could definitely fail us.
Yeah.
If enough countries say we're no longer on the dollar. That's another whole story.
And so we can have a lot of confidence in it, but ultimately it can flop at any point. That same sort of false sense of security found in Bitcoin, found in the United States dollar, found in gold, that same sort of theme is found all the way back. And so having to have something with a mark of all right, so the beast, if the beast is a person, and I do think that this beast here does represent a person, and I think down in verse 18 we're told who that person is, for it's the number of a man, and his number is 666, which spells Kaiser Nero, and it spells the beast. What if I'm just going to describe this and you tell me what comes to your mind?
Right.
A tool used for buying and selling with the name or the face of Nero on it.
Well, that was a coin.
A coin.
Gold coin.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we like to think about microchips and things like that as being the mark of the beast. For this first century audience, a coin is the mark of the beast. It's a tool marked with the face of a son of God, Caesar, that you had to use for buying and selling within the Roman Empire.
And the Roman Empire was basically essentially the whole world.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah.
Interesting. See, I look at it and say, all right, what can be done across the world today that would cause chaos, that one person could control everything? And that would be the electronic banking system, where somebody in power, somebody who was given power over the world, that everybody trusted, could take the electronic banking system and really shut it down.
Yeah.
And only allow people to trade and get money and use money by having a certain card because of their loyalty to him. And so it could be taken. I could look at that and say that could very easily be done. We could shut down, a person with that authority could shut down the banking system because it's all tied together electronically now.
Yeah.
And so you in China or Russia or anywhere could not get in and get money out because it's all tied electronically, and I just shut it down.
Yeah.
Unless you have a card. And so it could happen. It could have happened then. It could happen in the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's interesting because I could see it. I could see what you're seeing as being Rome because everybody was using Roman currency at one time.
Yeah. And I think the invention of standardized currency is just a reflection on the reliance of material wealth, the reliance on material wealth. A standardized currency is helpful to bring a sense of order and a sense of peace, but we talked about the Antichrist having a gospel of false peace. And I think that money is a false peace.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That it can come out from under you, at a keystroke.
Yeah.
And I think that we can pledge an allegiance to that rather than God. and that is something that we've been struggling with for thousands of years.
It's very true.
That it's a universal human experience, that we rely on material wealth instead of God.
Now, why do you call this person Kaiser Nero?
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand that, because it almost seems like you're taking Rome, but Kaiser, I think of World War I Germany.
Yeah.
So how does that all fit?
Kaiser's the Latin term for Caesar, which means general or conqueror. So Kaiser, it makes me think of the sub roll, a Kaiser roll, when I say the word Kaiser.
Okay.
In the Latin, it means King Nero or Conqueror Nero, Kaiser Nero.
Okay. So the Germans, when they took it and had Kaiser Wilhelm and Kaiser this,
yeah,
they were just saying those were kings and conquerors.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's king less from a sitting on a throne peacefully ruling a people, and it's more king of conquering king.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So the term 666 spells out Kaiser Nero, Caesar Nero, Conqueror Nero, and it also spells out the word the beast. And so it's a fun play on words, and the author tries to make it really straightforward. It says this calls for wisdom, so he's saying, like, use a little bit of wisdom, let one man who has understanding calculate the beast. And so you're supposed to calculate the numbers, and it spells both the beast and it spells Nero.
Do you think he knew?
I think. Do
you think
so.
John knew?
I think based on the start of verse 18, where he says, this calls for wisdom, let someone who has understanding calculate it. He says, hey, I'm going to like throw you a bone here. Like this, it's a little puzzle put in there for you. Go ahead and have fun with this. I think that's the way he's framing it.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's an interpretation I don't think I've ever heard or ever thought of when I read that. But it's interesting. You know, I just kind of glossed over that sentence too.
Yeah.
It was like one of those things that you just, and you pointed out, it's like, yeah, he is playing with us a little bit.
Yeah. I think it's part of the fun of the way he's used his imagination to convey his visions of the invisible world around us. And I think I think that some of the symbolism is meant to make us feel a little bit afraid, and some of it's meant to make us feel encouraged and empowered. And I think sometimes it's just meant to be like fun to read along with, because ultimately we know we're on the side that wins, right? So it's supposed to give us confidence.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why you could, you know, what comes in my mind is, could those two beasts be one person?
Could
they be a great conqueror and military leader, but also a conniving diplomat, you know, politician?
Sure. I mean, it says there that they're both arms of the dragon. So yeah, it could be two different ways of looking at the same person. You know, we call Jesus like our king and our high priest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it could be something like that, sure.
Okay. That would make sense to me. You know, like a Hitler person. Again, I go back to him because in real life, in my knowledge bank,
yeah,
Adolf Hitler's as close to the Antichrist as you could possibly have.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, he brings peace. He brings people love him. They worship him almost. He wears a army uniform, a general's uniform 1 minute, the next minute he's wearing a suit and tie.
Mm-hmm.
And he's fulfilling both of those roles. I'm sure there's a lot of people back then that thought, oh, this is it.
Oh, yeah, there definitely were.
I never even thought that, but I'm sure there were.
It was these interpretive lenses that said the events of Revelation are for a future event. Yes, those people were very worked up during World War II, very worked up during the Cold War. It was actually the French Revolution was the first known time that people started to look at Revelation that way, as like, oh my gosh, these events are happening right now. Because the French Revolution was, you know, upturning an entire society.
Right.
Their entire way of life was being toppled, and like the world's coming to an end, and they started reading Revelation into their circumstances.
That's funny. Yeah, people want to read it into everything. I think it gives people in a time of trouble, in a time of world chaos, it gives people peace to think that, okay, somewhere in this mess, Jesus is coming.
Yeah. Yes, that even what is chaotic, what feels out of control, what feels dangerous is still following a script that someone is in control of.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And it is a script that someone is control of. But it's not necessarily the last story in the Bible. But we want that. We want that, okay, this is really bad right now, but I think I'm going to get called up any second now.
Yeah.
And I think I'm going to miss all this.
Well, that's why you have such and we'll talk about this more another week, why you have so many people that are pre-tribulation millennial reign, or sorry, pre-tribulation rapture.
Sure.
Because they want to avoid the chaos.
Oh, of course. Of course.
Because we don't want to be a part of the suffering.
Yeah. And you know, there are Bible verses, and I don't want to get into all that now because we'll get into it another time, but there are verses in the Bible, throughout the Bible, in Thessalonians and different places that say he will save us from the wrath. And so, you know, again, I want to bank on that.
Yeah.
I want to know that. I want to know that God loves me. He loved me enough to save me from myself and from death, ultimate death. But so he must love me enough that he's going to save me from the wrath that's going to come.
Yeah.
And so I want to know that. I want to believe that.
Again,
does it really matter whether I go through it? Sometimes I feel like I'm going through it now.
Mm-hmm. Well, the language of tribulation, John uses, excuse me, he uses at the start of the book of Revelation. He says that he is suffering.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like we're all in part going through it now.
Yeah. And some more than others.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We have no idea in our country. People who are watching this, I don't know, you're watching it all over the world, maybe. And we know we have listeners in different parts like London and those people, but people that are watching this, you know, they look at us and say, "You guys have got it made." I think of Bungoma. There's one, but at least they don't have persecution yet.
Yeah,
we don't have it yet.
Yeah,
persecution. But when I think about the churches in China and certain places in Africa that are going through that, places all over the world where you're killed for telling people you're in Christ.
Yeah.
And so those are all things. How far do you want to go in this? Do you have more beasts? Or?
I wanted to hang out. I just have a few more words to say on the mark of the beast.
Please.
Yeah. So the mark of the beast is described as being on the forehead and on the hand of the followers of the beast. And the only other place where in the Bible where a mark is described as being on the forehead, in the hand, is actually one of the most famous passages in the whole Bible. And it's actually a prayer that the Jewish people would recite every morning when they woke up and every evening when they went to bed. And it comes from Deuteronomy chapter 6. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart, and you shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them down on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord with all that you have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great prayer. It's a great mantra that the Jewish people would recite every day when they woke up and when they went to bed.
So the beast is duplicating that, but now telling people, you shall worship me. You shall write this on your doorpost. You shall write it on your forehead. You shall write it on your hand.
Mm-hmm.
So he's basically duplicating, taking, and blaspheming.
Yes.
What was in Deuteronomy.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's an anti, as we have the Antichrist, this is the anti-Shema. This prayer is known as the Shema, which means to hear or listen, O Israel. It's the
That's
first
really
word.
interesting. That's a great observation.
That scripture, that mantra has done a lot to motivate me over the last couple of years in my life. It's a simple truth that I want to just keep in front of me again and again, that the Lord is God, that the Lord is one. Um, and it's a truth that if you grow up in an evangelical tradition, you hear it pretty early on, that even though we don't have statues we bow down to and these idol gods we make sacrifices to, that we put other things before God, that we value money, that we value pleasure, that we value entertainment or laziness and relaxation. We value those things more than we value God. And the Shema is a prayer against those things, that the Lord is God, that the Lord is one.
And the Antichrist does, or the beast, let's not call him the Antichrist yet or never, but he's basically anti-Shema.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point.
And that his Shema is used for buying and selling.
Yes.
That the thing on your forehead, at the front of your mind, and on your hand that motivates your actions, that motivates your thoughts and actions, is money rather than love of God.
And it's so true.
It was so relevant 2,000 years ago, and it is so relevant today, that people's thoughts are preoccupied by gaining money and wealth, and that people's actions are motivated by gaining money and wealth and power.
Well, and where we are now, and even more so today than back then. Back then you had money that was used, to buy and sell and do things, but it was more of people still were taking care of themselves. And even before the turn of the century, 1900s, we were a farming country. People had farms, they raised their food, they did those things. We are at a point in and this is another point about it being in the future or now, is that we're at a point in society now where you have to buy. People don't store food in granaries. They don't have big fields where they're raising their own food. They're doing their own thing. At least in our country, in developed countries. Now, if you go into other countries like we saw in Africa, the people they're growing things.
Yeah.
But if someone were to close my bank and say, Joe, you either bow down to me or you don't eat, and no one's going to feed you, because if they do, we're going to get them. So your money's cut off. You have no way of getting a dollar, and no one's going to help you because we're so divided, and the beast is in charge now, and his police and everything else. You're basically saying your family's starving to death. You're going to die if you don't bow down because I'm cutting your money off. That's a little bit different than what it was 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
But, and you can understand the power of that happening. And you then saying, who do I deny Jesus just to eat? And you could justify, and this is getting really crazy, but I could see justifying in your head, Lord, I love you, but I'm just doing this so my family can live.
Yeah.
That's a very powerful thing.
In a less one-to-one application in a theoretical situation, and a little more grounded, we do that all the time when you go to work on Sundays and say, yeah, I know I'm not going to church, but I have a relationship with God and I don't have to be in church, and I have to pick up these extra hours because my family needs the money.
Interesting. But that's, yes, that is true. We do that. And we do compromise.
I'm saying it's less of a one-to-one, like what you're saying, but I think we see echoes of this in our lives.
Yes.
Here and today.
Yes. And so it would be interesting at that point, because I'd like to think that I know where I'd go on that. But it's a scary situation.
Yeah.
And I could see the power where I couldn't see it back then, because you could still grow your own food and you do that. And the police, the army was in control, but there were still places you could hide. You could go. In today's world, you can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's I guess what I'm trying to say, Josh, is that I really feel that.
Yeah.
I really, really feel that. And it's a reality that has that the reason that says that about buying and selling is particularly because that's exactly it's not love of money, it's love of being able to eat. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I know
I could hate money.
Yeah.
But I have to eat.
Yeah. I get what you're saying.
Maybe you don't.
No.
And maybe it wasn't even relevant.
No.
But to me, it really made an impact on me.
Yeah. I get what you're saying.
All right. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Sometimes I say these things and I don't know if you're grasping, if they feel the same as they do to me.
Yeah.
I don't think they did.
No. I think the more I've read some of these historic interpretations of Revelation from previous decades, previous generations, previous centuries, it's interesting that every commentator is saying that it's truer in their day and age than it ever has been before.
Oh, wow. Great point.
And I think that the truths of Revelation are very true. And this is what goes back to what we were saying at the beginning. I think that it's very true because it's so true in our day and age. And during the Cold War, it was so true. And during World War II, it was so true.
And World War One.
Yeah. And so on
and
so
on
forth.
and on. Yeah, I get it. That makes sense.
And I think that is why the poetry here, that we might have to struggle through some of these images and some of these metaphors and poetic language. We might have to wrestle with some of that to get to a truth hidden behind it. But I think that because it's presented in the form of poetry rather than prose, that it makes it so real to our day and age and has throughout the centuries.
Makes sense. I get it. So that's why you were looking at me like,
No, it's both. I'm both like, yes, it is truer now than it ever has been. And it will be for the next generation. Yes. And it was for the one before us.
I get it.
The last character that I wanted to talk about today, we've been going long. This extra special episode, we're going real long with it. So if you guys are still sticking around, cool. If you need to take a break partway through, that's fine. No worries. Back. We took a break partway through. Yeah. Our editor, Zach, helped us out with that. But in chapter 17 is when we're introduced to a new character, the great prostitute. And this is this is meant to be insulting. It's meant to be very insulting. People still today will refer to someone or their mother as a sex worker, meant to be very insulting, incite a lot of emotion. It was true back then. And so you see the language of insulting someone by calling them a prostitute. You see that through the Old Testament, and we see it again here. Chapter 17, I'm just going to go ahead and start reading. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, "Come, and I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters, with whom the king of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers of the earth have become drunk." And he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and impurities of her sexual immorality. And on her forehead was written the name of mystery, the 666 or 616, depending on your manuscript. But I like that he throws it in there, the name of mystery. Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of the earth's abominations. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of saints and the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. That's it's some wild imagery.
Incredibly. Yeah, and I wanted to have music when you went in mystery. We should have like an organ going.
Yeah,
but I don't know who that is, and
yeah.
I don't really care to know. I mean, I do want to know, but
Yeah. Well, so this one's actually interesting.
Is it the world?
He goes on to tell us what it is.
Oh,
so
he does?
there's a couple times where John just leaves it. He makes his metaphor. He hyperlinks to an Old Testament passage and moves on.
See, I missed this.
There's other
Good.
times where he tells you what it is, and
Oh.
I always appreciate those times. It says that the 7 heads of the beast that she was sitting on are the 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. The 7 mountains are Rome was known as the city on 7 hills. Yes. And so these 7 mountains on which she is seated is the capital city of Rome. So here, rather than calling out the whole empire, he is focusing in on Rome itself, the capital city, and calling it out.
So all these people that have talked about the Roman Empire and the return of the Roman Empire and all the stuff, you keep coming back to Rome.
Yeah.
So there is actually evidence that now I know why people always bring Rome up, and that the Antichrist has got to come out of Rome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are some blatant, like I said, here he's explaining what it is,
I've heard
and he blatantly
with the
says
7
what
hills.
Is.
I know that.
And so sometimes people will say, yeah, some of this is literally Rome. Other times it's metaphorically talking about an empire that has yet to come.
Right.
Some people want to distinctly divide the two. Again, I go back to an idealist interpretation where I say it is both. It is both. We saw this played out in Rome. I think that Revelation is talking about Rome and that it's all played out in Rome, and that it was played out in the French Empire and the British Empire and Nazi Germany and the American Empire. Well, and that we see these themes again and again.
So who is this lady now? Go keep reading, please.
This lady is the god of Rome. So remember we were saying about in the Exodus story, God calls out the gods of Egypt, but it's also Pharaoh. This is the same sort of thing. They believed that there was a chief deity over Rome, and her name was Roma. It's not very exciting. And that she is the chief deity over Rome. And he's calling that deity a prostitute, and then goes on and calls her the mother of all prostitutes.
Wow.
So just blatantly insulting their God, saying your God is nothing, and that your God sits around adorned with gold and jewels and pearls. Rome was known for its exploitation of all of the territories that it conquered. Mm-hmm. It took whatever wealth and resources they had. And so here she is, just like a fatted calf. She is covered in gold and jewels, like Scrooge McDuck sitting on her pile of money. Mm-hmm. And they're saying, this is your God. Your God is fat and lazy. Your God is...
Who is saying that?
John is saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he's basically...
Or the vision John is given.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
That the God of Rome is pathetic, that they may have a lot of wealth, that they may be drunk with the blood of the saints, because for decades the Christians were being put to death by Rome. Yes. And says you've become drunk on that. You think you're powerful, but you're going to get your comeuppance.
Oh, that's interesting. Very good.
Yeah. The verse number 15, the angel said to me. So this is an interesting one. He's saying that the angel is showing him this image and telling him what it is at the same time. So that's why he's writing down the explanation of what it is. The angel said to me, the waters that you saw where the prostitute is seated are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. Rome had conquered the known world. And so this throne that she sat on was the known world. Verse number 18, and the woman that you saw is the great city that has dominion over the kings of earth. We have a couple of verses in there where it tells of her fate. Oh, sorry, one more image. The 10 horns. Verse number 12, the angel tells him that the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received royal power, but they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour together with the beast. These are of one mind, and they hand over their power and authority to the beast, and they will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them, for he is the Lord of lords and the King of kings, and those with him are called chosen and faithful. So this is an image that's set up, and then we get a whole explanation for it. There's a sea of great people that is the whole known world Rome had conquered. There is a beast with 7 heads. These are the 7 hills of the city of Rome. Sitting on top of it is the goddess Roma, who is full of wealth, who is drunk on the blood of the martyrs. The 10 horns of the beast are 10 kings that have yet to come. So this angel saying the Roman Empire will last a little bit longer, but in the end it will wage war against God. And the 10 horns, the 10 kings, are described as being of one mind, that they all have that same mentality of strive for money and power and control, and that ultimately the way of the Lamb will defeat them.
Wow. That's powerful stuff.
Yeah, I really love chapter 17 because it gives you this cool image that is evocative, that is accusatory, and then gives you a clear explanation of what it is, and says that in the end, the army of the Lamb, the faithful and the chosen, are going to defeat it.
So why do you think the angel told John that one and didn't tell him everyone?
I don't know.
I mean, think about
Wouldn't that have made it so much easier, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But wow. So he actually explained. He might have said, "I'm gonna give him a break here. I'm gonna just tell him this one."
Yeah,
I'm not supposed to. But.
And I think that's why a lot of biblical scholars will lean into the preterist interpretation to view all of this as the empire of Rome, right? Yeah. Because the couple times that the angel chooses to explain the imagery, every time the angel chooses to explain the imagery, it is talking about the Roman Empire.
Yeah. Now I have heard it said that, okay, you extrapolate that out and you take that into the future, and it's the Catholic Church and it's the Pope. And that
was very popular during the Reformation,
and it's still around.
Yeah,
it's still around.
Well, that's why I said the people who are theorizing the world's going to end this weekend, it's because of the Pope.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah. Okay, yeah, and so a lot of people there are some very reputable pastors, preachers, evangelical preachers who believe that it will all come down to the Catholic Church and the Pope.
Yeah.
And that the power will come out of Rome, and it's going to start there, and it's already starting with the European Union, and there's 10 countries, and those are the 10. I mean, telling you, I've heard all these things, and no one really knows.
No,
but it's really funny.
No, I think there will always be a mystery around it, but the thing we're giving confidence in, chapter after chapter after chapter,
we win,
is that we win. Yes. That the Lamb will conquer,
and not because we win, but our conqueror.
And the way of the Lamb is, again, we talked about this imagery a few weeks ago. The king comes in already covered in blood, and it's not the blood of his enemies; it's his own blood.
Yeah,
it is through selfless love, and that his sword is not wielded in his hand, but that it comes from his mouth. That it is the words of the Lord. Amen. that will combat the lies and the misinformation and the deceit.
Awesome. I think that's a great way to end it. Yeah. I thank you for all this, for looking at it, for being open about your feelings about it and everything. I think this has been cathartic in a lot of ways for me.
Yeah.
In just realizing where I am and who I am and all of this and how it all fits and everything else. But thank you. I thank you so much for your willingness to share this and the whole thing.
Happy to.
Yeah, it's been wonderful, Josh.
It's been really great for me to have a chance to go back through and read Revelation some more. And you keep bringing up things each week that I'm like, wait, I don't remember reading that in there. And then I go back and, I'm challenged to keep going back to the text.
Well, and I am now too. And Revelation, frankly, has been a book that I've looked at, listened to other people talk about, but really never dug into it much myself, because it was just, I don't know if it was a fear of it or what, it was just, okay, Other things are more important. I want to hear about
Mm.
Jesus. I don't want to hear about all this, even though that the whole book is about Jesus.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's almost like I want to hold Jesus where he is now. I don't want to. It's just crazy. But I didn't spend a whole lot of time on it, and now I want to. I want to go back and study it in depth and do all those things and kind of let God talk to me through it. So thank you for all that. I wanted to tell you folks that our pastor, Pastor Dan Hansen, I think is going to do a really great thing. And I think if I say this now, it's okay because it's going to be after worship tomorrow.
Yeah, this episode will release after
Okay,
church
good,
tomorrow.
good. So what he is asking us to do is to take a month, the month of January, and to do a fast on social media, to stay off social media for a month. I think social media is horrible, even though we're on it.
We're a part of it.
I have not been on social media in 10 years. That doesn't mean YouTube. I'm on YouTube. I go on YouTube to look things up and to do things, but I'm talking about Facebook and Twitter where you go on and you join a conversation and next thing you know, you don't even 10 minutes later, you got people calling you all kinds of names and you don't have any idea what you originally were talking about.
Right.
So Pastor Dan has asked us to fast on social media for a month. And so we are going to honor that. We're here at Canton Nazarene Church. This is part of our church that we're doing. And so by honoring his wish and honoring this fast, we are going to go off the air for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And we won't be posting any podcasts for that time. I hope that it doesn't cause you not to stay with us. I hope it causes you to hunger for us more and to want to come back after 3 weeks. We're doing it because we want to honor what our pastor wants and what we're being called to do and what our church is doing. We don't feel it would be right sitting here doing podcasts when we're supposed to be in a fast and getting off of social media. So we'll be back when, Josh?
26th.
26th?
Yep. We will have the next episode in our Revelation series dropping at 12:30 on January 26th.
Okay. So join us then. Again, follow us on all the platforms except YouTube. You have to subscribe to us. And I would hope that you would do that, please. If you enjoy this and you want help us bring it to others, help us grow and reach other people, subscribe to us and follow us, please. Take the time to do that and continue to join us. We will see you then on the 26th of January. God bless you. Have a wonderful 2 or 3 weeks, and we'll see you then. Take care.